So why have I asked the questions, Agile teams only work with psychological safety? I'm going to go through that. I'm going to talk a little bit about myself for a minute. I've done 4 Agile transformations in FTSE 100 companies, 4 different companies, that is. And so I like to think I have both the experience and trust of many of my clients to deliver on this sort of thing. In terms of an experience of how it works and doesn't work. Also, in addition to that, I've done these transformations as far afield as USA, North America, and Japan, and Europe in between. So that's my sort of lineage, if you like. I want to thank the Agile 20 Reflect Festival for giving me the opportunity to present on this subject. It's been one of the most successful, if not the biggest global Agile successful festival ever, 600 worldwide events in this month. So it's fantastic to see all the work that this group have done and the support they've had. And finally on that, it's been made possible by volunteers. As you know, this is a non-subscription service. And if you feel like you want to make a donation, then I would kindly ask you to go along and see these pages. Okay, without further ado. So today, it's about the people. When I talk about psychological safety, I'm talking about the people. And what we will go through is definitions today. We will look at the couple of psychological safety approaches. We'll look at Agile principles and why does Agile fail. We will also look at CultureWorks consulting approach, consortium approach to challenging, empowering, and developing, and how that fits to psychological safety. Particularly, we'll talk about trust. And what we mean by that is feet to the fire, not head on the block. And finally, we'll look at team development and productivity. So as we look at that, let's all enjoy a bit of a laugh. COVID has been a horrendous time for the last 12 months across the globe. And I saw this cartoon recently, and it just made me smile. Everyone's saying, well, I can't understand why I'm tired, or I can't understand why I'm a bit lethargic, without realizing the weights they're carrying around. And I think sometimes we're very conscious that we don't use the opportunity to reflect on the human input, the people input into why things work or do not. So what is psychological safety, seeing as that's what we're talking about? With the 2 quotes I'm going to give you, 2 definitions. One comes from Amy Edmondson, who's probably the most famous and most well-known individual in this field. She wrote the book Fearless Organization. And the key thing is you will not be punished and you will not be humiliated. You can see an awful lot of people, old office banter, politics, all that sort of stuff, where humiliation was a key part of how things went on. And that needs to be something that, while it's good to have humor, it's not good to use people as butts of jokes. So speaking up with ideas, questions, and concerns on mistakes, that's where she put this whole process and definition. The other person I'm going to talk about, because of, I think, the skills he's brought to this area recently, is you feel included. You feel safe to learn, safe to contribute, and safe to challenge without fear of being that embarrassed and punished element again. And I think these are 2 simple, not long-winded, but absolutely accurate. Often people struggle with a definition, and I don't think we have to in this field. Some of this slide's a bit small, but I want to mention, particularly at the top, a guy called Edgar Shin. Most of you, all of you would have heard of this guy. And in his original book back in 1965 with the co-author Bennis, they describe psychological safety over a couple of paragraphs. We run through, and really not a lot happened for nearly 30 years. And then Amy launched her book back in 1999-2000. Where she did the definitions, and she talked about that it needs to be core to as a learning event, organizational learning and so forth. And then we accelerate through to 2014. Seminal, good old Google, love them or hate them, they did this amazing 3-year study they called the Apostle Study, And they found out of the 5 things that came out of the study, psychological safety was the biggest issue in high team performance and productivity and welfare. So I would ask you to go and look at that Aristotle study. It's been written about a lot. While all the detail, typical Google, is not available, it is a very interesting book. Finally, this accelerates us to 2020 and 2021. So Timothy Clark brought out his book, The 4 Stages of Psychological Safety. And in 2021, as part of ISO 45001, we're now going to have 45003, which is guidance on managing psychological health in the workplace. This is recognized as a big thing. And if ISO are producing a standard on it, then we really need to pay attention. With that, I just want to recount the 4 Agile principles and then talk a little bit about the 5th that's mine. So individuals and interactions over processes and tools. What this is, and this will be far clearer later on, is about inclusion. It's includer safety. It focuses on individuals and their interactions with the team. Interactions also comes into the trust equation, and we'll go on to that later on. Working software over comprehensive, I'm not going to read through the slide, but you can see this is all about learning. It's all about delivering things through learning how to deliver them. Finally, we talk about collaboration. Thirdly, we talk about collaboration. Collaboration safety is clearly very critical to Agile working. If you're not collaborating either with the product owner or with the product ambassador or with the rest of the team, you aren't going to deliver the contract that you have to deliver on your project or program. And finally, responding to change following a plan. I read this one out because it always sits a bit uneasily with me. I think what I would add there is predetermined plan. So in other words, planning is essentially in Agile working, responding to change, but that doesn't mean you don't plan for that change as it happens. And again, this is the challenge of safety element that we'll talk about later. Finally, the 5th one that I've added myself, and I'm very passionate about, hence we have a people first organization here, is leadership and courage over management and process. I'm not saying when you use the word over that management and process are following a plan or contract. These are not important. I'm just saying the things on the left we value and would put ahead of the things on the right. And this goes to respect and permission over paternalism and exploitation. So that sort of sets out where I see psychological safety coming into the 4 Agile principles from the Agile Manifesto. Now we move on to the meat of this matter in terms of what is the question. So simply put, and it's a bit blunt, I was once head of an Agile transformation organization, and I asked whether we could put this on the website, and I was refused. But it is all about the people, stupid. It was coined back in 1992, pretty much at the birth of Agile, by the Clinton administration, when they talked about it's about the economy, stupid. And then they went on to elaborate into people. Agile only works if you have a people-centric organization. Agile only works if you live values and you live norms and you establish excellent behavioral habits. We will talk about how you achieve that later on, but what is critical is you bear in mind it's first about the people. As Richard Branson once said, if I look after my people, they will look after my customers. And I think this is a classic case. I'm advising with an Agile group at the moment, with a view to helping them more formally. And at the moment, it's quite clear that the people, had a conversation this morning, are secondary in their organization. And we need to change that around for it to be a success. So sticking with the thing about why does Agile fail, and it's about the people, well, it's about communications. It becomes, if communications become a flurry of a snowstorm and they become overwhelming, it's very difficult for people to understand what they should focus on and what they should prioritize. I mean, I give you a simple example. from my last long-term interim, we had Yammer, we had Trello, we had two other sort of communication products in terms of, we had telephones, and we also had Skype, and we also had Zoom. And it just go, well, which one am I following? And then on top of that, we had a couple of the things like Teams and so forth were added as communication tools. Slack was another one. So is it overwhelming? Do you have focused? And if it is overwhelming and you don't have a focus and no one knows where to go, it becomes inconsistent. And you must meet regularly as a leadership team, as a agile team, to ensure that the purpose and why you're there is consistently delivered to people within the agile teams. Otherwise, it becomes unclear. And if it's unclear and unarticulated, then communication again suffers. And it's communication that keeps us all together. It's communication that ensures we're moving in the same direction. Look at some of the things that have happened during COVID. The majority of those issues where they've been negative have been down to poor or inconsistent or badly articulated communication. The other thing that I like to talk about with communication is not the same as broadcasting. Broadcasting is where I just sit here and do what I'm doing today, which is to tell you stuff. There is no closed loop. There's no coming back to me on what I'm discussing with you. It is just, you have to listen. Well, communication isn't just about talking. It is about both listening and talking, and making sure you understand. Seek to understand before you're being understood, as Stephen Covey put it. And I think this is critical. Much that we hear is about people saying, I told them and they didn't do it. Well, maybe you didn't listen to what they said or even ask for their commentary. And finally, communication is hindered, or also hinders, trust. And we'll come on to talk about the trust equation, as I referred to earlier. This is an interesting slide around Agile fails. It comes from the Agile Alliance, and they put in 8 reasons why Agile fails. And as you can see in the top, in the 8, 5 of them are all to do with people. They're all to do with how people fail, not because they fail, but because the system is set up for them to fail. So number one is not a surprise. It's a lack of experience with agile methods. Well, they don't learn, they're not being educated, they're not being taught, they're not being allowed to question appropriately. They're being told this is how we do it, rather than contributing to the development. Agile is a framework, not a method. Frameworks indicate that you need to take these as a set of guidelines, a bit like the structural scaffold, the structure of a building, and then you build how you want your building around your steel structure. And that's very true of agile methods. Philosophy and culture, 42% of the respondents said that was an issue. Again, that's to do, there is a clash between the people, the philosophy and the culture, and there's no attachment to the agile values. So people in interactions will be subsumed by it's a process and will tell you what to do. A lack of management support. So again, this is communication often, but also it's about the fact that having set off on this journey, they then find that there's no one underneath them. It's no one above them supporting them. It's what we call the tsunami wave, where the top of the organization becomes associated with experimentation and comes expecting to see things change because they want better productivity. The level of the organization that's doing the delivery gets incredibly excited about their freedom, and then you get the frozen middle. So the middle of the organization, the middle of the wave, sits back, and then the wave breaks all over the people at the bottom, and it's a mess, and it's very uncomfortable for everybody. Fifth in this was a lack of cultural transition, and again, that was 36%. And the organizational communication problems, which we've talked about. So this is where these issues, this is why, and they are fundamentally human issues. people issues, communication, and psychological safety issues. Finally, I want to look at, in this section, look at the learning organization. Many people talk about this, and this is absolutely where psychological safety sits, as well as absolutely where we sit in terms of experimental, and Agile uses experiment to develop change and to improve productivity, either through spikes or through retrospectives or through other methods of looking at what they're doing. The key issue here at the top of the triangle is to get everybody to agree to do something that's different, to do something that's changed, to do something that's improved, that's going to do something that's going to be something that they hadn't previously thought about doing things. But actually, the most important thing is not the result. The most important thing is you understand how you got to the result. My experience in pharmaceutical and biotech academia shows that they publish loads and loads of papers telling them how wonderful they are. And actually, you ask them to repeat the experiment and they can't. And this is critical for people. They must, you're not learning if you say, oh, the result's great, but you don't understand how you got there, or if you got there, you can't repeat it. If you go through this iterative process at the top, eventually you'll realize that you've gained experience, and that experience translates into how you believe about things, and your beliefs will change. And it's the beliefs that underlie and support your intrinsic behaviors. Equally, intrinsic behaviors, when repeated, support your beliefs. So it's a virtuous circle there, but also it can be a destructive, vicious circle if you don't get this right. And where comms and people aren't put first, this learning triangle breaks down, and you get an awful lot of doing and not a lot of being. And this is why psychological safety is also important to Agile. So we talked about Amy and we talked about Tim. I just want to talk a little bit more about Tim. We as a group have this challenging, empowering, developing process that we take people through when we engage with clients. And you can see that with the 4 stages that Tim outlines here, it's just a simple, practical way of taking forward psychological safety with teams. And you'll see when we get into the detail how that works. It incorporates the 4 principles of the Agile Manifesto. I talked about inclusion, learner, contributor, and challenger safety earlier under the principles, and put them very clearly where I felt the principles were aligned with those stages. And the other thing that is critical about their understanding of psychological safety is what is at the heart of Agile. It moves towards innovation, which is what Agile is about, improvement and innovating and productivity, from inclusion. You cannot improve things if you don't include everybody, or the improvement will be temporary. So that's Tim's book, came out last year. Oh, sorry, yes, 2000. And if we can look at this a little bit more clearly, you'll see that there are 2 axes, the respect and the permission axes. Those of you who've worked with Agile will know quite frequently there's a lot of lip service paid to respecting teams that have gone Agile, and isn't this a wonderful thing, and we're going to crack great moments in the company's history. So and the respect is too high without having gained any understanding of what it means and how it will work. People give lip service, and this becomes paternalistic, and that actually isn't useful, because you need to take people from being included right at the bottom all the way through to challenger status. And finally, on the bottom axis, if you give people lots of permission, but you have no respect for what they've done, and you have no respect for their process, you're just exploiting people. And for me, I think exploitation is the biggest form of Agile failure that we have. And that's why psychological safety will get over that type of Agile failure, and we will be able to invest in continuing to drive productivity through Agile working. One thing I should have said at the beginning, I don't consider Agile working as something that is only for software teams. I believe that there are lots of things that you can do with many other organizations, without talking about being an agile software team. It is something else as well. So let's very quickly look at these areas of psychology. Includer safety, well, this is what it means. It means you come with worth as an individual. It means you arrive on the team and you are included on the team. You become part of the ceremonies of the team. You become part of the communication of the team, and you are introduced and you know everybody by name and they know you. It seems like a simple process, but believe me, I've sat in rooms where people don't know everybody on the team. And why is that? Well, quite often in agile teams, they are not teams. Quite simply, there are collections of people who are put under the banner of being a team, but actually they aren't a team. You know, the architect comes from somewhere else. They're not co-located. They're distributed without proper communication tools. That is not a team. That's a working group. And Katzenbach and Smith explain this very clearly in their approach. And we need to be actually a team. That means regularly meeting daily. That means being inclusive of inviting everybody and making sure everybody attends. You know, the absent landlord in terms of the product owner is something that's often talked about. In terms of moving that forward, learner safety. So what this means is that people are allowed to learn. They are allowed to make mistakes. They're allowed to and can be given the background to how this team works, what it's working on, what its purpose is, what it will deliver, why it's doing it, and also start to understand more about why this team works the way it does. Then we move up to collaboration, and collaboration is all about, do you get a chance to work on the work packages, on the tasks, on the stories? Are you part of the degranulation of the prioritized backlog? If you're not, then you're not collaborating. You're just someone who turns up and they give you some work and you say, you will get on with this. As we all know, Agile is about being collaborative. It is about everybody, especially the people going to be doing that task or that piece of work, being involved. And I think this is a team norm throughout. Finally, we want to talk about challenger safety. What this means is that if you want to challenge something and you feel that there's a better way of doing it, you can. And when you do that, no one is going to criticize you or take the mickey or harass you, even if it's the head architect that you've pulled up or the head of brand or the head of logistics and said, I want to challenge how we're delivering. I want to challenge how we are architecturally scoping this area, because that's challenger safety. You're allowed to say things that exist today are not, you believe, done at the best in the best way. So these 4 stages. The other thing that I'll come on to talk about a little bit, well, I'll talk about it when I get there. So we talked a little bit about Amy. Amy Ebson's book, The Fearless Organization, is a fantastic book. I highly recommend both these 2 books if you want to get a background in psychological safety. And you'll see from this book, I've pulled out something called the Leader's Toolkit. And in that toolkit, I'm not going to go through it individually, but you'll see there's plenty in here that starts to look at how it fits to agile working. Just to take an example, under practice inquiry, just look at model intense listening. Well, that's your meeting in the morning, the stand up, it's the sprint planning, it's retrospectives. All these things fit very well into an agile team. And if you don't have them or they don't work, then you will lose psychological safety and effectiveness of the agile team. I talked a little bit about feet to the fire, not head on the block earlier. What I mean by this is that you should be accountable, okay? Yeah, everybody in the team should be accountable. And who are they accountable to? They're accountable to themselves. They're accountable to what they committed to. That is the important thing. And if they succeed together. And if they fail together. It's not an individual who let down the team. It's the team who let down the individual by not supporting them well enough. So there's some other things in here. When you have it, when you don't have it, and these are fairly clear. You hear about people saying, well, you know, we don't want to rock the boat here. It's a bit difficult. So psychological safety is life with trust. And now I want to sort of just look carefully at the trust equation. What is the trust equation? Well, it's credibility, reliability, and intimacy divided by self-orientation. And I'm not going to go into, I think they're fairly self-evident. I'm happy to answer questions in chat or somewhere if people have but you can find this fairly easily on the internet. The one area I want to focus in on is intimacy. This is not, do you have inappropriate relations, or do you have inappropriate contact with fellow members of the team? It's about, do you have regular contact, and is that contact acceptable to both parties, and how do you use it? That is intimacy. It's walking into the office and saying, well, did you hear from Jim today? He's not in. No, I didn't. I've got no idea where he is, and I don't know what he does, and I haven't seen him. So, you know, I've come across several so-called agile teams that work in a way where you ask where people are and how they are and what they're doing. There is absolutely no central answer to that. Now, I'm not saying you need to know everything about every team member, but it is about being aware and safeguarding your fellows. After all, you are dependent upon them. So we talked about the communication piece, and the worst type of communication is the command and control tell. Good communication creates well-being because it's about listening and seeking to understand before being understood. And this phrase also comes from Covey, but is typical of Edgar Shin's work, the book Humble Inquiry. It's about having an open question. It's asking the 5 whys. It is rather than presuming something in the question, did your car break down today? Why are you late? It's about saying, you know, what happened this morning? Can I help in any way? It's about being not judgmental or not presuming something before you ask the question. So I would encourage everybody, this is the 3rd book I've recommended during this webinar, and I would highly recommend Edgar Shin, although there are later editions now, Edgar and Peter Shin, The Humble Inquiry. It's a great book, and it talks about the gentle art of asking instead of telling people what you want to hear. So again, it's about trust, it's about people, and if you're going to have a successful agile team, you may need to move from tell to asking questions and open conversations. If you don't have those, and if it's not always understood it's about the people, then it will break down. You will have a psychologically unsafe team. And the thing that I alluded to earlier was the 4 stages of psychological safety. And what I mean by that is also that it's not a linear and it's not a binary state. You can go through these levels of safety at different times, and different members of the team will have different views on where they are on this. But what they must be is in or on this timeline, and they must be working their way towards improving themselves towards challenger safety everywhere. Some leaders find it difficult to have collaborative safety. Some new members of the team can be over challenging without actually learnt anything or understood the collaborative nature of the team. So it is, and when I say it's not linear, you move up and down this, and there are times when you'll be at the top on some subjects and times when you'll be further down the stages. And as I said, it's not binary. A team can move through several of these stages, and therefore constant attention needs to be given to it's always about the people. With that, I want to turn to talk to you about how can we actually look at teams? How do we actually improve their functionality? What is it that makes teams really sing? And I came across this tool about 2 years ago, and I just want to give it a mention in psychological safety because it really talks about what is it that people want to do? What is it that they enjoy doing? They enjoy doing. And in talking about that, can people hear me again? Sorry, I think that we disappeared for a moment. Ooh. Great. Okay, thanks, Rod. So as we look at this area, what I want to do, sorry, now the presentation's gone, I guess. So apologies. New systems. So hopefully everyone can see that again. Okay, apologies for that. So I want to talk a little bit about the GC index. Why? It basically looks at where people want to add value and have impact. This isn't about their aptitudes. This isn't about their personality. It isn't about their capabilities. It is about 5 areas. So people basically perform into a game changer, and you can read the screen. I don't need to go through that. But a game changer is someone who comes up with ideas and wants to change the way things are done. A strategist who is very keen to take the ideas and put them into a deliverable program that can be acted upon. The implementer who wants to take that program and wants to plan and wants to deliver it, implement it. And finally, you have the polisher. That's someone who, once the product is or service or thing that we're working on has been delivered, they want to spend some time, maybe refactoring code, maybe looking at the improvement on node values around this deployment. And they will polish so that things that we missed, things that were features, but they got dropped or reduced, they will be very keen to pick up those type of features and make sure they are fully implemented. And finally, at the center, you have the playmakers. And playmakers are people who bring everybody together and act as a voice of reason and discussion across the other 4 interpretations. The key part of this is it identifies motivation as a personal thing. It says that you can be part of the visibility of parts of a high-performing team. Excuse me. And by doing that, by contributing in areas where you want to add value, you feel more psychologically safe. And let me just explain what that means. If you look at a team, funnily enough, that's my own personal GC index in the top right. As you can see, I'm a strategist who likes to make sure, excuse me, that strategy is in place and that we can implement it. I'm a little lower on the ideas generation and the playmaker, but I also like to ensure that we circle back and make sure that the strategy is being put in place and that we haven't missed out some major value points. And that's a pretty good description of me and my life since I've been an exec, CEO, president in the States of companies. This is how I've run. And once I had this, I went, wow, that is me. It's amazing. The other thing that's important is that you can look at a team analysis, and I've included this. Now, the important thing is that not all team members are the same, and quite often you'll look at people who've recruited in their same image. Now, what people mean is they're the same personality. That doesn't mean that they want to have the same impacts. And that's where I think if you're doing psychologically safe teams, this can have a significant and valued input in terms of putting the team together and also understanding at what points different team members want to contribute. And let's talk about that contribution with this now. So I'm sorry it's a bit small, but hopefully you can all see this. What this does is it just takes 3 projects that we were involved in, and it puts them across an annual timeline. And as you can see, the deliveries were annually on the projects that we worked on, pretty typical. And you can see here that the different roles were not expressed, but what was expressed was where people wanted their GC index profile was expressed. And you can see that when we looked at this, that not everybody is as, I don't want to say the word important because everyone's important, but what I'm trying to say is that not everybody has the same impact at different stages. And you can see if we just take the cost reduction program at the top, we needed ideas. In the first quarter, we needed ideas. And so we gave idea generation and the responsibility for the 2 strongest members in the team for idea generation. Then you can see later on as we went through, we didn't, once you've got the cost reduction program worked out, you don't want people throwing in new ideas again. What you want to do is to implement. And so we did a strategy fix. We did that, as you can see. And In terms of looking at that, we then, when you look at this, you can find that you can use this to actually direct the team and make sure the leadership of the team comes from the right individuals as you go through. Every person's a leader in the Agile team, and if they get their opportunity, that makes them psychologically safer. And you can see here this adequately generates where you want to use the different GC index types of people to fit in. It's not a personality, it's about where they want to add value. And that's really important in terms of making an Agile team function. We then wanted to talk about aptitude and behaviors. And in all the things that I've done with the Agile teams I've worked with, I find that using a strengths-based tool, this one happens to be Gallup derived, is a great way of understanding the types of skills people have and how they deploy those skills across 4 theme areas. So you can find strategic people, you can find behavioral people, and I'm not going to go through Gallup strengths here today in great depth, but this, what it does is allow you to focus on where people are strong. So not where they add the most value, but where they're strong. So they might be a great individualist or a great maximizer. They're often related people who want to maximize individuals' contributions. So this provides the team analysis and direction improvement as a tool. It's an app-based tool, and you can use that with the team analysis at the bottom that I've shown here. And it helps you to establish good coaching for the team by giving them pushed prompts on behavioral change. And it's behavioral change that you need to make stick. Everybody can stick people in a classroom, in a learning meeting workshop. And in general, most people have forgotten most of it by the time they're 4 hours out of the workshop. What this does is use a tool to prompt and keep those behavioral changes at the front of mind through an app. And we found this incredibly useful in terms of going through that behavior of actions, results, and the experience changes people's belief and their behaviors change. And we use this tool a lot to help with psychological safety in these situations. So moving forward, what does poor psychological safety mean? It means failure. So as we look at this, if we don't have the inclusion, learning, collaboration, and challenging stages of a team's psychological safety, we can't produce agile release trains or sprint planning or release planning or any planning, come to that. And it's, remember, it was we value over planning, not that we don't need planning. And that's very important when we think about psychological safety. With no retrospectives, there is no continuous improvement. Well, these are core tenets of Agile. We're working, the team is deciding how they will do things. If there isn't a retrospective on how they can improve the how, then how are they going to improve the how? And that means that makes them very unstable as a team if they're not doing this, because they're just doing the same old, expecting better results. Well, it won't happen. Continuous improvement, that is what we need to do to get to productivity, and we need to create improved productivity. We need to create a psychologically safe environment for that to happen. And no solution and productivity improvement happens without people all working together and feeling as though they're respected and feeling as though they can contribute and challenge to make those differences. We've talked about the GC index. I feel, in my experience of working with Agile teams, this is critical knowledge for high performance. Knowing where people want to be valued, where they're motivated to contribute, is most important, because that's where people get their biggest emotional and psychological refill, is from doing things they want to do through the high value contribution that you can identify. And finally, the aptitude evaluation with behavioral change. You need to help teams. You need to support how they change their behaviors and how they evaluate their aptitudes. So with that, we are 3/4 of an hour in. I want to say to everybody, Agile fails if you're not a people-first organization. You need to improve your comms. You can do that through leadership development. and other matters. But leadership development is a great way of establishing that. Thirdly, get people involved in what they're doing, and they all want to add value. So if you do the GC index, you can support people to get there. And finally, behavioral change takes a long time. It's not something you can deliver in a workshop. There's more about me here. I'm going to struggle now to work out how to open. I was trying to do it when I was talking before, how I open up the forum for everybody to contribute. And I'm not so sure I can. So please, if you want to ask me questions, please do that. You can make an appointment if you follow that calendar thing. I'm more than happy to talk with people and have follow-up after this event. I will be sending out a copy of the presentation. So I don't see any questions coming through on the chat. So with that, you have my email and I have yours. So many thanks for your time today. And without further ado, I'll end the meeting. Oh, hang on. I'm getting someone. William is just sending me a note, so I won't quite shut off the event. All right. Okay. Thank you, William. Yeah, sorry. Okay. Goodbye, everybody. And thank you again for attending. Bye-bye.